Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling some pretty big questions about how we see the world, ourselves, and maybe even the universe.
Yeah, we're going to be exploring the idea that our understanding of reality itself might be on the verge of a pretty major shift.
That's right. And to guide us through this deep dive, we're going to be looking at an excerpt from Paul M. Helfrich's The Emerging New Worldview. This was published back in 2000.
And even though it's been, oh, well, a couple of decades, it's amazing how relevant these ideas still feel today.
Definitely. So, our mission today is to unpack what exactly is the current Western worldview.
And whether those beliefs are, well, are they changing? And if so, what might this new perspective look like?
Right. Because it's not just about abstract philosophy, is it? It really affects how we live our lives.
Absolutely. A worldview, I mean, think of it as the lens through which we perceive reality. It's that collection of our beliefs about how everything works, all our assumptions about the universe, ourselves, our place in it.
So it shapes how we interpret everything we experience, like a filter on our perception.
Exactly. And like any lens, our worldview it can become outdated. It can even get distorted over time.
Oh, that's a good point. Like, think back to the Copernican revolution. People used to believe, they were certain, that the Earth was the center of the universe.
Until Copernicus came along and said, nope, it's the sun.
And it completely turned everything upside down.
Right. And that shift, it wasn't just about astronomy. It challenged the authority of the church, and it changed how people understood their relationship to God and the universe.
It's a classic aha moment that really shook things up.
For sure. And it reminds us that what we collectively believe to be true isn't always accurate.
History is full of those examples.
Oh, yeah. Tons of beliefs that were widely accepted but later proven wrong.
So let's fast forward to today. What does Helfrich say about the current, the dominant Western worldview? What does he say about what we believe now?
Well, he points out that science and religion are the two most powerful forces shaping how we see the world, but they often seem at odds with each other.
Right. That's interesting. They both try to explain the universe, but from very different angles, using different methods, different types of evidence.
Exactly. And he highlights the potential problem of unproven scientific theories being treated as if they were absolute truth.
So we sort of elevate them to the level of dogma, even if the evidence isn't all there yet.
Right. He uses the example of Freud. His ideas, presented a pretty bleak view of human nature.
Yeah, that we're all just barely civilized, suppressing our primal urges all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Driven by these subconscious desires that we're not even aware of.
And that kind of thinking, it can have real world consequences, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like if we believe, as Darwin suggested, that competition is the main force driving human behavior, it can be used to justify things like environmental exploitation or even war.
So what other core beliefs does Helfrich identify within this current Western worldview?
He lists several. One is the idea that the mind and body are separate entities, and then there's the emphasis on predicting and controlling the environment, often through technology and medicine, of course.
And how does he connect these beliefs back to both science and de-religion? Because those seem like they come from very different places.
Well, it's fascinating how those threads weave together. Take the mind-body separation. It stems from Descartes' philosophy.
Like, ye think, therefore I am, right?
Yeah, but it also echoes certain religious notions of the soul being distinct from the physical body.
It's like we're caught between these two powerful forces, trying to reconcile their sometimes contradictory messages.
Exactly. And Helfrich also points out that the deep-rooted fear of human nature, especially our capacity for violence and sexuality.
Right, that idea that we're inherently flawed or dangerous.
Yeah, which can be traced back to religious concepts like original sin, but also gets reinforced by some interpretations of evolutionary psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It creates this feeling of unease about who we are, at our core.
Okay, so we're starting to get a clear picture of this current Western worldview, but Helfrich titled his work The Emerging New Worldview, so there must be more to the story.
Oh, there is. He starts by pointing out some cracks in the foundation of our current worldview, suggesting it might not be as solid as we assume.
Cracks? You mean like evidence that it's not the complete picture?
Precisely. He poses a thought-provoking question. If science is so great, why haven't we solved problems like poverty, disease, and war?
Good point. We've made incredible scientific progress, but it hasn't necessarily led to a utopia for everyone.
Right, and he also brings up something called psi phenomena, things like telepathy and clairvoyance. He points out that there's actually scientific evidence supporting the existence of these abilities, but they're still highly controversial.
This is where it gets interesting. Our listeners love exploring these ideas that challenge conventional thinking, especially when there's actual evidence to back them up.
Exactly. And Helfrich argues that these phenomena, the ones that are often dismissed by mainstream science, might actually point to the limitations of our current understanding of consciousness.
So these experiences that some might call woo-woo, they could actually hold clues to a bigger picture.
Precisely. And it's not just psi phenomena. You have millions of people reporting experiences with things like UFOs, channeling, lucid dreaming, and near-death experiences.
And these are happening regardless of what science or religion says about them, right?
And Helfrich suggests that this might be a sign that our current worldview is too limited. He proposes that we need to find ways to bridge the gap between science and spirituality.
So to move beyond purely rational thinking.
Yeah, and acknowledge that there might be other valid ways of knowing.
To include intuition and subjective experience, right?
Yes. And he talks about embracing those alongside reason and logic.
This resonates with me. It feels like we often try to box ourselves into thinking versus feeling. But what if those two sides aren't actually separate?
That's exactly the point he's making. And he suggests that transpersonal psychology could be a bridge between those worlds.
Like a way to understand the self that goes beyond just the ego.
Yes, and recognizes our interconnectedness with everything.
I think our listeners would be fascinated by this idea. It aligns perfectly with their interest in personal growth and exploring different levels of consciousness.
And he even quotes Jane Roberts, who channeled an entity called Seth, saying, "You are multi-persons. You exist in many times and places at once."
Now, that's a concept that really stretches the imagination. Like it points to the possibility of a much richer and more complex self than we typically acknowledge.
Right, and it ties into the idea of a conscious universe,
The concept that consciousness isn't just something happening inside our heads.
but might actually be a fundamental property of reality itself.
So instead of a purely material universe, we might actually be living in a universe that's aware.
It's a profound shift in perspective, and it leads us to the heart of Helfrich's argument. The emergence of a new worldview that reframes our entire understanding of our place in the cosmos.
This is where things get really exciting. So let's dive into what this new worldview actually looks like.
Okay, before we get there, Helfrich talks about the power of myths.
Myths, you mean like ancient stories about gods and heroes? I thought we were talking about science and spirituality.
We are, but myths aren't just old tales. They're symbolic narratives that express a culture's worldview, and they help us make sense of the world around us. And Helfrich argues that the current Western worldview, it actually has its own myth.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued now. What is the myth of the modern Western world?
He sums it up beautifully, drawing on the work of Willis Harman. So picture this. The story starts with the Big Bang. Billions of years of evolution through random mutations and natural selection, and all of that leads to the human brain. We believe the essence of who we are is in our DNA. Our main drives are survival, pleasure, and procreation. So it makes sense that the economy is at the center of everything.
So it's a story of almost accidental existence, right? Driven by
Right.
biological urges, and the goal being economic success.
Exactly. And that myth, I mean, it's permeated every aspect of our lives, from
Yeah.
education to healthcare to how we interact with the environment.
But if this myth is starting to crumble, what's taking its place? What signs are there of this new worldview emerging?
Well, he points to a headline from the LA Times, "Time, Space Obsolete in New View of Universe." And he connects that to the development of string theory in physics. He also mentions the increasing acceptance of consciousness as the primary source of reality. And here's where it gets really fascinating. He suggests this new worldview embraces a multidimensional universe where consciousness is the driving force. And he even uses the concept of non-locality, which has been proven by scientific experiments like Bell's theorem. It shows that even in quantum physics, things aren't as separate as they might seem.
So even at the subatomic level, there might be connections that defy our usual understanding of space and time.
Exactly. It challenges our idea of a clockwork universe where everything operates in isolation. He even mentions Rupert Sheldrake's work, on something called morphic fields.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those. But could you explain morphic fields a bit more for our listeners who might not be familiar?
Sure. So think of it like a universal library where information about learned behaviors is stored, and it can be accessed by all members of a species.
So it's like there's this invisible web of information connecting everything, influencing how we learn, how we behave.
That's the idea. It challenges that traditional view of a purely material world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it suggests a deeper interconnectedness than we might imagine.
This is a pretty radical departure from the idea of a purely material clockwork universe.
It is, and Helfrich even suggests this might explain why we see, those simultaneous discoveries in science and art.
Like Marconi and Tesla both working on electricity around the same time.
Exactly. It's as if those ideas were in the air, just waiting to be discovered.
That's a really inspiring way to think about creativity and innovation. Like we're not just isolated individuals, coming up with ideas in a vacuum.
But rather tapping into this larger field of consciousness.
Okay, so we've got this emerging worldview where consciousness is primary and everything is interconnected, and even time and space might be more fluid than we thought. But what does all of this mean for us? How would this new worldview change the way we actually live our lives?
That's the key question.
Eh,
Helfrich outlined some core characteristics of this new worldview, and they're pretty profound. He talks about embracing a multidimensional understanding of the psyche.
like saying there's so much more to us than just our everyday waking consciousness.
Exactly. And this ties into the growing interest in things like lucid dreaming, astral projection, other practices that explore these other dimensions of ourselves,
It's like we're realizing we're not limited to just our physical bodies and five senses.
but have these vast inner landscapes to explore.
This new worldview also emphasizes the importance of intuition and subjective experience alongside reason. It's not about rejecting science or logic, right?
No, it's about integrating them with other ways of knowing.
So it's a more holistic approach, acknowledging that there are multiple paths to understanding truth.
Precisely. And there's a shift from competition to cooperation as a core value. Instead of seeing ourselves as isolated individuals, struggling for survival, we start to recognize our interconnectedness
Hmm.
and the importance of working together.
Instead of survival of the fittest, it's thriving through connection.
Right. He explains that this worldview sees life as a process of value fulfillment, where the universe itself is designed to support individual growth. It's a much more optimistic and empowering perspective.
We're not just random accidents, but each of us has a unique purpose, and the universe is helping us to fulfill it.
Exactly. It shifts our focus from fear and scarcity to abundance and possibility.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the definition of a worldview to the potential emergence of a radically different way of seeing ourselves and the universe.
And it's a lot to take in, that's for sure.
It is, but it's also incredibly exciting. Like it's like we're on the cusp of a major shift in consciousness.
It's up to each of us to decide how we want to participate in it.
This all raises a big question for me, though. If the universe is conscious and supporting our growth, where does free will fit in?
That's a profound question. I mean, if we accept the possibility of this new worldview, what are the implications for everyday lives? How do we integrate these insights into our relationships, our work, our interactions with the world?
Those are big questions.
They are. And it feels like we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, it feels like we've opened up this whole new way of seeing things, but haven't quite figured out how to navigate this new landscape.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. There are no easy answers.
Which I guess makes it all the more exciting, right?
It does. It's an invitation to explore, to experiment, to see how these ideas resonate with our own experiences.
So instead of trying to grasp some grand theory, we should focus on how this new worldview might actually play out in our own lives.
Precisely. And remember, this isn't about, blindly accepting everything Helfrich says.
Or rejecting everything from the old worldview.
Right. It's about taking what resonates.
And leaving behind what what no longer serves us.
Exactly. It's about personal discernment.
Not dogma, right?
Right. Not just swapping one set of beliefs for another.
I think one of the most important takeaways from all of this is the realization that we might have more power than we realize.
Oh, absolutely.
If consciousness is truly the primary force in the universe, then we actually have the capacity to shape our own reality.
That's a powerful thought.
It really is. It's like saying we're not just passengers on this ride, but active participants shaping the journey.
That's right. It comes with a lot of responsibility, but
Yeah.
it's also incredibly empowering. We have the potential to create a world that's more aligned with our
A
values.
world that's more peaceful, more just, more sustainable.
Exactly.
So if we're not just products of our environment, but active co-creators, where do we even begin?
I think it starts with becoming more aware of our own thoughts, our own beliefs. What stories are we telling ourselves about ourselves, about the world, about what's possible?
Yeah. Are those stories, are they empowering or are they limiting?
Exactly. And it's not just our thoughts, but also our actions. Are we living in a way that reflects our values? Are we contributing to the kind of world we want to see?
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Precisely. It's about being open to new experiences,
Mhm.
challenging our own assumptions, and constantly learning and growing.
That's what I love about deep dives like this. They open up all these new possibilities and encourage us to keep asking questions.
Absolutely. And the most important thing is to approach this exploration with a sense of curiosity and playfulness. Don't get too caught up in trying to figure it all out.
Just explore, experiment, and see what resonates.
That's it.
Explore, experiment, have fun, and trust our own inner compass. That sounds like a pretty good recipe for navigating this new world.
It does to me too. And as we wrap up here, I want to leave our listeners with one final question.
Okay, I'm all ears.
If we truly accept this idea of a conscious universe, one that is designed to support our growth and evolution, what does that imply about free will?
Mm.
Is our path predetermined, or do we have the power to choose our own destiny?
Wow, that's a profound question.
It is, and I don't know that there's a simple answer, but it's definitely something worth pondering as we continue to explore this emerging worldview and its implications for our lives.
Well, on that note, we'll leave our listeners to contemplate that question for for themselves. But don't worry, we've got plenty of resources in the show notes to help you continue your exploration of this fascinating topic.
You sure to check those out.
Yeah.
And keep an eye out for our next deep dive. We'll be tackling another set of mind-bending questions.
Until then, keep diving deep, my friends.